on 7 work. So please take away.
Cool. Thanks, Russell, for running through all those. And yes, everyone, definitely to reiterate, please take a look. I guess I'll get into this when we go into the Java section next. But to add to deletion vector kind of stuff, folks, you might see like in-flight PRs for certain optimizations we want to do for synchronous maintenance that we're looking into for deletion vectors, and that's stuff that can happen before the spec change. But just mentioning that so people can take a look at those PRs and give feedback, that would be definitely really appreciated. Okay, so going into the next section for the Java library. So thanks to Ozan for adding better defaults and configuration for retrying S3 throttling failures. So in the Java library, we didn't really expose any configuration for like how many retries you should do on throttling and like which conditions should you even like retry on. Like we largely just relied on the SDK, and now there's kind of configuration for being able to tune that, and that from the AWS S3 teams kind of testing, they're able to improve reliability of workloads. So after kind of tuning a lot of these values. So thank you to Ozan for that. Thanks to Naveen for adding view support to the Hive Catalog. Always great to add kind of views is kind of a relatively new addition in Iceberg, and so being able to add support for that in different catalogs is always really appreciated. So thanks, Naveen. Yeah, thank you to Eduard. There was an issue where basically the REST client would incorrectly update the last updated time on table metadata. There's like a last updated, I think it's like a last updated milliseconds field. And so when rebuilding the table metadata on the client side, it would incorrectly set that. And so that led to some like really confusing behavior for some folks. So thanks for fixing that. Let's see. Yeah, so thanks to Anton for basically adding the ability to parallelize manifest writing when there are many new files. So typically when you have like a delete that touches a lot of files and across a lot of manifests, basically this PR has a lot of benefit because you're able to just write all the new manifests you want to produce in parallel. And so there's naturally noticeable speedups, and this actually ties into the deletion vector aspect I mentioned earlier, where a lot of what's driving this is like being able to do quick synchronous maintenance, and then also being able to just in general make the commit process faster. Let's see. Yeah, thanks to Ajantha for adding utility to compute partition stats. There's a lot of movement on partition stats work, so I know Ajantha's been driving that, so thanks for that. That I imagine that will be used in like the different procedures, but Ajantha, correct me if I'm wrong there. Let's see. Let's see, Rust. Okay, on to Rust. I don't know if there's anyone from the Rust community that wants to add here, but I was just gonna jump into it. This is from what I was looking into yesterday. Otherwise, I'll just go into it. Okay, cool. So thanks to Scott. I saw that there was a PR that got merged for supporting page index filtering in Parquet. So I can imagine that there will be certain workloads where that adds a pretty significant performance boost for reading, being able to skip at a very granular level in Parquet. See, thanks to Alon for adding the ability to convert Datafusion filters into Iceberg expressions. So there's been, in general, I've kind of noticed there's a lot of progress happening on the Datafusion integration. So that's pretty awesome to see. Thanks to Fang for adding projection pushdown for the Datafusion integration as well. Let's see, PyIceberg. These just, again, same thing here. These are the stuff I saw yesterday, but if somebody from PyIceberg who's more active there wants to take this, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll just go for it. Okay, so for there was a PR that got merged for adding metadata tables for data and delete files. So thanks to Soumya for that. That's all. Those kinds of things are really useful because there are many cases where basically if you don't have a huge table and you don't need distributed compute like Spark, and you can quickly just use Python to kind of look at the active file or look at the files in your table. So that's really useful. Thanks to Felix for adding missing support for the month partition transform. That's very much appreciated because I think we had partition evolution for a bit, but we just didn't. We were missing a transform, so that's really important. Good catch. Let's see. Thanks to Sung for fixing a correctness issue where there was basically given a sufficiently large data file where there was certain deletes, so position deletes and row filter. There was an edge case where basically the remainder of record batches wouldn't be properly returned, and so it was essentially a correctness issue that got fixed. So that's always important to fix. So thanks to Sung for that. Let's see. Next, I'll go into releases. So I think Riley had release like kind of like a tentative release timeline for 1.7. So is that basically what you're asking for, right? Like what kind of an estimate, I guess, or like?
Yeah. So I guess specifically for the Iceberg Java repo, how do like branch cuts happen? Is this going to be something targeted towards like end of October or November, or like I guess what's the timeline?
So that was our original thought, was to try to target early October, actually, but we've been real slow on all the V3 spec things. We were hoping to get in at least a bit of V3. So if you have noticed, we have gotten in the ability to upgrade your table to V3, but there are no actual V3 capabilities. So you can mark a table as V3, but that's about it. So we were hoping to get some of those changes kind of in before we did 1.7 release. So I'm thinking end of October. If we don't make any progress on getting these specs finalized in the next week, I think we probably just call a branching anyway at the middle of October and just be like, that's going to be 1.7, and we'll just push out other V3 stuff till later. But I'm hoping we can at least get like default values in, and maybe the type promotion stuff, because I think all that's relatively close to being done. So at least we'll have some of the V3 stuff ready.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess like it's kind of like there's some implementation and some like spec change stuff that would be really great to have kind of in before that, but yeah, if we're not able to make progress, I think it does make sense to just have a end of October kind of just cut, and because there are also a bunch of fixes that have been kind of accumulated over time and a bunch of improvements too. So
you can always do another release.
exactly.
That's the.
Do we actually have any other pressing, bug fixes or features that we would like to ship rather sooner than later? I mean, in general, I agree that we should wait a little bit for the other V3 stuff to land, but if there is something like pressing that we want to ship,
I think
we can do, like you said, we can always do another release.
Yeah, I think we've accumulated a lot of stuff that is even beneficial without all the V3 stuff in it. And I'm not sure if any of the AWS folks are here right now, but I know they had a bunch of stuff they wanted released sooner or later.
Eduard, in terms of bug fixes, is it more for 1.6 branch or more for 1.7 directly?
No, I mean, whatever we would ship with 1.7, whatever is currently in master and isn't shipped.
Okay, understood. Yeah, makes sense.
Well, Brian is saying the Kafka Connect licensing PR will be there. Oh, that would be great. I mean, releasing with the Kafka Connect is probably a good enough reason to do a release too.
So, Russell, what do you think about doing 1.7 even if V3 is not complete? Is it? I mean, what's your point about that?
I don't think that's a problem. So, like, I don't think we're going to finalize everything we want in V3 in that time, just because we still don't have the delete vector proposal even done. So we would have steps after that to get the implementation and even, and I think that's probably the biggest code change. I think of all of the other things that we kind of have cooking in the spec thing, they're all relatively simple implementations except for that. I think the lead vector is super complicated, so I think that's not going to be in 1.7 unless something changes dramatically. I don't know, Amog, Edward, have you talked to Anton or Ryan about this? I talked to Ryan yesterday. He just said he was working on it.
Yeah, that's I guess the kind of plan is yeah, Ryan's working on a lot of the spec changes, and we're kind of looking at like what are the kind of aspects of implementation we can get in that don't require the spec changes, so like all the synchronous maintenance stuff that can go in before, because it's not really tied to like the representation of the deletion vectors, right? But obviously, yeah, the actual implementation of like the bitmaps and like all the kind of like lookup logic, that has to happen after we come to a consensus. And I would also probably agree that it'll probably take some time. Um, but um, but yeah, JB, to go back to your kind of question, like I would say it's okay if we like are missing like definitely parts of like the specs, like the parts of the spec, some of these spec changes before 1.7. I think that's fine. I think we're just trying to get like as much as we can, and then probably just call it so that we can ship it, and then yeah.
Yeah, so I think that regarding what Eduard said about some fixes, and according to the plan that we plan actually 1.7 beginning of October, I think that it makes sense to push for a release pretty soon and target v3 updates for 1.8, for instance.
Yeah, I think the idea is to try to do it like we did. For everyone who hasn't been here for a couple of years, the way we did V2 is kind of the same thing, where we started releasing pieces of the V3 or V2 implementation and spec, piecemeal in various Iceberg 1.x releases until finally the entire V2 spec was done. We called it finalized, and we said, now this is it. And I think we'll probably do the same thing here, where we'll I mean, this is just personally, I wanted to get as many components as we could in already, because I want us to be actively making progress, and I feel like sometimes trying to put deadlines is a way to force some of this to get in, especially because I think some of it is relatively simple to actually program. We just need consensus on how it looks, and I don't know what else is a forcing function to get people to actually look at things.
Yeah, no, I think that it's fair to say that we need to have some kind of deadline. I agree with that, but we know that spec change in implementation takes time.
Yep.
So I don't think it makes sense to hold releases, especially when we have fixes and stuff like that. So I would propose to move forward on 1.7 pretty soon, and then we do the best to include v3 updates as soon as possible.
I think that's good. I mean, why don't we say that we'll aim for, unless anyone has an objection here, like a Halloween 1.7, so end of the month. I mean, the cutoff then is basically the week before that. Like if you aren't in by then, it's probably too late. I think that's fine. We then just plan everything else gets pushed out to 1.8. Candies are available for anyone who comes to my house.
It sounds like we want to start like a dev discussion in the next week or so on 1.7, right?
Okay.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I'll send out an email proposing the 31st as a release date. Let people know what's going to get pushed out if they don't do reviews quickly or check out stuff. And if anyone else, does anyone here have anything they want absolutely to be in 1.7 for other reasons that are not spec related or V3 related?
So we did get in this camp planning rest spec, and I'm working on implementation. I'm trying to get something hopefully by I guess the week before 31st. That's why I wanted to ask who's the release executor. So I guess based off that progress, I'll let you know then. Like
Yeah, I know a lot of people are excited about those new APIs. I'm also super excited to know who's implemented them on the server side. So if you have, please let everyone in the community know, because I'm sure we'd love to see how that works.
Cool.
I'll go one also mentioned in the chat. So there's a 1.7 milestone. So I've been putting PRs with that milestone.
Good point.
Yeah, from my side, I have in the Windows 7, I want to make the flip 27 the default, the flip 27 source in the thing. But right now, there's a blocker on the Hadoop file parser. Yeah, I was discussing with Eduard also a little bit. Also, Peanut one he also made some comment. But I think we still don't have a consensus on how to move forward. The Hadoop file JSON parser.
Okay. Good point on the milestone though. I think yeah, we should probably just start that soon and then just have people add whatever and then we can kind of figure it out.
Cool.
All right. Thanks for that was a good discussion. Yeah, moving on to some of the kind of broader discussion topics. Iceberg C++ for Puffin reader writer. I think it was Gabor. If you
Yes, it was me who put it here. So the context here is that I started looking into the v3 positional delete spec as an Impala developer, and you might know that Impala is in C++. Actually the execution part. So far we managed to get away without having an implementation, our implementation of puffins, puffin readers writers, because so far puffin was for storing specs, and the planning part of Impala is in Java, so we could use the one from the Iceberg library. But from this v3 delete vectors, we're gonna have to read and write puffins from the C++ side in the execution side. So we started wondering where to put this. So one obvious place would be to put the implementation of these puffin readers writers into Impala, but we would like to donate it to the Iceberg community. So I found two solutions here that we could follow here, and I'm not in favor of any of them. I'm comfortable for both of them. One is having an Iceberg C++ library, not exclusively for the puffin, but initially exclusively. And we will see whether there is a community need to add anything else. In case there isn't, then this can become like a stale library here that doesn't change, only has the puffin stuff. But in case the community is okay with that, I'm okay too. The other one would be to extract all the language implementations into a separate library like Iceberg Puffin or something like that, and have the Java, C++, and all the other language implementations there, so that we can do like a cross-language interop tests, let's say. So whatever we write with the Java one, we could have tests whether they are readable with the C++ ones. I'm also in favor of this one, but also like the other one. So I would like to hear what the community thinks. Anton, we had a conversation with Anton about this. I'm not sure if he's on the call. He said that he would more prefer the Iceberg C++ library, even though if this is only going to be the Puffin readers writers, he's fine with that. I just wanted to hear the opinion of anyone else.
Yeah, between these two options, I'm also in favor of the Iceberg C++ because I have a Puffin as a separate module project, and with all the language, but it seems like it's different with what we have been doing. So I'm also in favor of the C++ project.
Yeah.
A lot of us have been talking about multi-language projects.
I also agree that having just a separate C++ project is probably the simplest, and you don't have to change anything on the existing Puffin readers and writers in Java.
Yeah. I agree to that. I think it's same reasons as everyone else kind of mentioned. Like it follows existing pattern, and if it starts with just Puffin, that's cool. And then if like the rest of the community wants to like add more functionality, then they can propose stuff. But yeah, having a separate library which initially just starts with Puffin, I think that makes sense to me.
I seem to remember that discussion on the Rust. So can you explain a little bit what's the problem with using Rust in the C++?
there is no specific problem. We just wanted to make it C++ only for Impala because we would have a C++ implementation anyway, just for, let's say, performance reasons. Because in Impala, we even have our own Parquet reader. We don't use the Parquet library for that, so that we can like do it as integrated to the code, to the executor code as possible. So yeah, I asked around on the Impala community, and the consensus was that we're gonna have a C++ implementation anyway. There is no like Rust libraries included to Impala so far, and I saw that this is something that the community doesn't want to change now with the Puffin readers writers. Okay, I think we have a consensus on the Iceberg C++ library then. I'm not sure if I have to open like a vote mail thread or something like that. I think we had a discuss thread. There were no objections there.
If we have a lazy consensus on the discussion thread, just go ahead. I mean, we don't need a vote for this.
Okay,
Yep.
sounds good. So I'm pretty sure I don't have the privileges to start a project like that, but I will reach out to someone in case there is a volunteer that would be appreciated to help me out here. I don't even have the implementation for the Puffin stuff, so I will start doing that. But meanwhile, I will start thinking of how to kick off like this new language library in Iceberg 2.
Cool. Thanks for that. That's great.
Thanks.
Okay. Next discussion, I guess, standardizing vanity credentials used in load table responses. So I think Eduard.
Yeah, exactly. So I added that because that was a leftover from the last catalog sync meeting. I think the last item that was brought up is, so right now what the PR is proposing, or the spec change that is being proposed, is have load table, load view response, return a list of credentials, and the credentials are well defined in their structure. And the reason for the well-defined structure is essentially preliminary work for another proposal that I'll be bringing up, is to be able to refresh those vendor credentials, and we'll have a so you'll see in the proposal, but there will be a separate endpoint where if you call that endpoint, you get a well-defined structure of vendor credentials. And like I said, the last discussion point was, you know, why standardize credentials in the first place versus why not just return the config? And I think my main argument for that is, now that I focus more on the refresh part of the vendor credentials, is it would be weird if the vendor credentials, the new endpoint would just return an arbitrary config of, like, a server could put in anything in that config, right? Whereas like the credentials would be well defined. When you call, give me the latest credentials for that table, you can reason more easier, have an easier way of reasoning about what the server does, and you don't have to deal with any arbitrary configuration that is being returned there. And based on the discussions on the PR, it seems like we are in agreement. I just wanted to see like if there were any other comments. I think the main comments were from Yufe and Jack. Jack is probably not here today.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to have a schema for the credential. Although I have a little bit concern about in case any change happen to that credential. Let's say there's new field adding to that. Are we gonna change the spec again, or we still allowed to server to just provide a key value mapping, key value maps to the client side, so clients can decide.
I mean, I guess we can always do what we used to do, is like if we require any new field or we need a new field, we just make it optional and add it for backward compatibility.
Can we have this in the schema, like a basic schema plus extra optional key value pairs or something like that, just in case?
Do you have any special fields in mind that could be added to credentials?
I don't have anything specific in mind, but last time we synced with Jack, seems like there couldn't be any change happen to the, for example, S3 credentials. It could be changed over time. And I think I also discussed with Russell last time, yesterday about for example, if you have any change on these S3 credential, let's say you add a new key, right? So if we ask for schema change every time, which takes too long, right? So we have to make it more flexible in that way. But at the same time, we don't want to rely on the S3 client itself to pick up that one. We still need the Iceberg REST API to support to pass through, then that S3 client can pick up that one.
And I think that to sum what Yufei said, I think that we discussed also about external new system like Huawei system or whatever, that we don't know exactly what kind of property they can use with credential. So it's just to anticipate eventually some additional fields we may need without changing the spec. Maybe it's stupid, I don't know, but it's just to be sure that we cover all cases.
Yeah, for me, looks like we should have worked on that new endpoint first to figure out things better, then kind of backport to the load table. Because by that way, we have a very nice structure layout to support like not only these three major cloud vendors for credentials, but also potential new credential like JB mentioned.
So the new endpoint definitely only requires those fields for refreshing the credentials. The reason I didn't propose it is because I didn't want to deviate the discussion from, standardizing credentials versus how does refresh look and where do we do what. So yeah, in terms of like what we need for refreshing the credentials, that's pretty much it. Like there's nothing else.
I guess do we want to just follow up through like the PRs and the mailing list to see like it sounds like maybe people want to look at the refresh endpoint and kind of see the input and output to help guide the decision, like if we want to make it really well defined, make the credentials like standardized or not.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The first thing, let's go back to the very beginning, is do we need the extra endpoints? I think pretty much everybody have the consensus that we need that endpoint because every time you try to refresh the credential, you don't want it to load the whole table meta, which is sometimes it's heavy, also performs. So we need that endpoint. By saying that, we can actually active working on that directly. Potentially, I think we'll make sure the credential itself, how do we refresh it, and what's the structure of the credential passing between the client and server side. We figure that out, then we can think about a backport to the load table.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I'll open a discuss thread with the refresh vendor credential proposal, which essentially depends on the standardization, but that should give people a good overview of how the full picture looks like. And then once people see how this looks for the refresh, we can then go back and like standardize and then focus on the refresh. That sounds good.
Okay.
I see there's also refreshing of file IO credentials point. I don't know who added that.
That was me. This is I don't want to skip someone else's
Okay.
update.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I guess I want to make sure I'm mindful of time. So we can move on to the yeah, kind of open questions and updates on materialized views. Jan, I think that's.
Yes. Okay. To quickly recap, so materialized views can be seen as an extensions to normal views, where we pre-compute the query and store the results in a storage table. And in order to be able to determine if the data in the storage table is fresh, we need to store some additional metadata in the storage table, which is in particular the snapshot IDs of the tables being referenced in the query of the materialized view. And there we need to somehow relate the identifiers of these tables with the snapshot IDs of the time when the last refresh operation was performed. So, but now we have this issue that the same catalog could have different names with different query engines. So we realized like having the identifiers as part of the spec might not be optimal. Maybe we can somehow solve this issue, but currently it's not. Identifiers are not really unique or not the perfect tool. So we decided to use UUIDs to identify the tables. But we still need some way, the query engine still needs some way to get identifiers because it needs to fetch the current state of these tables from the catalog. And this can only happen with identifiers. And so currently there's two proposals to get to these identifiers. One is to parse the query again. And so every query engine will do this then differently, but they will parse the SQL and get the identifiers from the SQL. Or we store these identifiers as some kind of lineage information as part of the view. But there we still have this catalog alias issue where we're not really sure what to do with the catalog. And yeah, we've been discussing that, and we thought maybe it's just wanted to bring it to like the broader attention. Maybe you have some ideas what to do about this problem. I mean, you can still go to the thread and also have a look at all the things that have been proposed, or also answer in the future.
Just add a little bit to what Jan was saying. So the catalog alias problem can also happen to the same engine, right? Because Spark, you can configure the catalog name and put the endpoint. Different Spark config, let me use a different catalog name. So even we define, or let's say, a SQL flavor of Spark, okay, the engine Spark, and if you use reference the catalog name in the SQL, that may not be work for another Spark application. We may configure the catalog a different name.
Yeah.
So that problem is actually more broad than different engine.
So is it basically then a query engine specific representation of the table identifier? Because I'm a bit confused that a table identifier is not a table identifier.
Well, table identifier is just a namespace and table. That is unique. That's a unique course. But the reference to the catalog name, let's say if you have a REST catalog, someone may call it prod, another one may call it Iceberg. They use the same engine like Spark, different setup, they may call the REST catalog differently.
Ooh.
Yeah, like right now the view spec, the catalog that you like kind of the default catalog that gets set, right? That's like a name. And that was done because obviously SQL, it's all name based, but I think maybe with this materialized view case I understand the problem, right? And I haven't been really following the problem, to be honest, but if I understand the problem, right, we're hitting this like limitation where to be able to do like a proper refresh, because the catalog names can be different across engines, like you need some way to kind of normalize it. I think I've floated the idea of like catalog ID in the past, but that just kind of feels weird to me. But yeah.
Well, the thing is that if we kind of fall back to the SQL parsing, like mean, for many use cases, maybe they will use the same catalog, in which case it would be fine. Or you make sure that you set up every query engine with the same catalog name for the same catalog. You just have to make sure of that, and then this would work. But if we kind of fall back to the SQL parsing, we could move ahead with the spec without really needing to fix this catalog aliasing issue right now, because we're not introducing the identifier as part of the specification. So we're not going to define a new struct. We will just fall back to the SQL parsing. If we really want to introduce the identifier concept into the spec, we have to solve the catalog alias issue.
Yeah, I sorry to cut. I guess I would probably lean towards the first one. I feel like, yeah, I feel like if we basically if we kind of just work with this assumption that engines, if you want to reference, like use a fully qualified name, you have to have the same catalog name. Or I guess even to Steven's point, even in the same engine, it can obviously, you can configure catalogs with different names, but I think that's kind of the assumption that's baked into the view spec right now. And I don't know if we want to change all of that for materialized views, but all right. So I think someone had their hands raised, so I don't want to.
Yeah, thanks, Samuel. Well, first of all, you mentioned the idea of assigning UUIDs to catalogs. I think actually it makes sense, but I mean that's not what I wanted to say. What I wanted to highlight is that I think when we talk about table UUIDs, there is nothing that guarantees that this UUID is actually unique. What I mean to say is that UUIDs can be generated in a unique way, but once they're in files, nothing prevents the same files to be visible by different catalogs, because there is the register table API, which can be used to kind of move tables between catalogs. And once you move, the IDs in the files, they don't change, right? So I just wanted to make sure that people actually keep this in mind in terms of uniqueness, because I think it's a fundamental problem.
So, Dimitri, are you thinking about migrate table or copy table? People use the same UUID?
I mean the register table API in catalog has the register table, right?
I see.
Which you can just take a metadata file and register it with a particular catalog, but the ID is already in the file in storage.
All right. So
we can end up with two catalogs having a table with the same UUID, just theoretically.
okay, I want to follow up one idea. Mo talking about the catalog ID. I think Mo didn't mean like a UUID. I think he means something like just name identifier. Can we use like the catalog endpoint to be the kind of identifier, catalog identifier?
That's not guaranteed to be unique, especially if you have network boundaries. Things may have a different name externally, internally. And
I see.
So
Okay.
I want to maybe to propose, I'm not sure how controversial that is, but maybe restrict MVs for now to the same catalog. I mean, it's a tough problem to solve. I mean, if you have different catalog names, or for other things, then
I think we should move this to the dev list. Like, thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
I think you're totally right, but we've spent a lot of time on this, and everyone is really interested, which is great. But let's make sure we get this out for everyone to comment on. But thank you so much.
That's good.
Cool. Yeah, because there's time. So I guess moving on to the next one. So do we want to talk something else about refreshing file IO credentials?
Yeah, sorry. This is just quickly. I want to bring people's attention to this. So this is basically the opposite side of the refreshing credential problem, which is that you potentially can have a file IO instance which has credentials that have expired, and you want to update the credentials within that file IO instance. Take a look at the PR. I have a comment there that I just wanted folks to check out. Basically, the issue is you get back a response. You now have new credentials. You need your file IO to reflect that. In our current Java implementation of the REST session catalog, there is no safe way to make a new instance of that file IO within table operations. So like you're in table operations, you've done some kind of refresh command. You can't actually make a new file IO because we allow REST catalog to provide a custom bifunctor which produces new file IOs. So there's no way to build one in the same way that the catalog would have built one. I also think that might not be the right thing to do here, because I think maybe the file IO itself should have some kind of API for allowing a external caller to refresh the credentials within it. So I basically give two options that me and Eric were talking about, which is, do we allow the table operations to actually have access to the catalog and potentially use that same constructor that the catalog used to make a new file IO? Or do we present a new API within file IO so that if you do call like a refresh API, you can refresh the IO without rebuilding the whole object if that particular instantiation of file IO doesn't need to do that? So something to think about there.
It feels like this goes a little bit into the direction of what I'm going to propose on refreshing vendor credentials on file IO, because like every file IO, like I have the work locally, and what that does is like once you have the vendor credential for the table, you have for each file IO there's a different mechanism, but the idea is the same.
Yeah.
So you just hook a mechanism for saying like, oh, before the credentials expire, please refresh.
Yeah, I think so. The point here is, do we let the file object take responsibility to do the refreshing, or we let the REST table operation object to take responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I'm agree with Russell. We probably let file takes responsibility, which is cleaner, just in case we have an interface allow a user to inject a file, like customized file into that. So in that way, it's really hard to let operator object to inject credential into the customized file implementation.
Yeah, so I agree that file IO should be handling
the
refresh of the credential. And I mean, maybe things will be clearer once I share my proposal, because
cool.
Maybe we don't need that PR then.
Yeah, and if you could check out that PR as well, just to see what you're thinking,
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yep.
Sounds good. Cool. Yeah, folks, please take a look at the PR. Okay, last topic, Iceberg Summit 2025.
Yeah, this I mostly just want to make sure everyone saw. I sent our JV sent out an email on the dev list. I respond to that as well. I'm really excited about the prospect of doing Iceberg Summit in 2025, and I think we have at least some financial backing now to make sure that this happens. So I want to make sure that everyone who's interested gets in the things that you want to see, the things you want to do, how you think it should look, and how things should happen. Because again, I really want another great community kind of focused event where everyone really has a say in how it happens, and it kind of gets built in a very transparent way. So please leave comments and stuff there, because when a proposal gets made to the PMC on how to actually do this, I want to be able to incorporate everybody's feedback.
Yeah, so basically, please answer the question on the thread, like in-person, hybrid, what kind of talk you want, stuff like that. And then we will fill kind of proposal to the PMC. And so, yeah, I can do, as I did for the first Iceberg Summit, I can do the paperwork with a foundation, but we need the PMC first. And so it's important for you all to give a feedback and your perspective about the Iceberg Summit. So thanks for that.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, folks, everyone, please give feedback on that. Yeah, ditto to what everyone else already said. We want this to be a really great success, and want the kind of wider community and people who are maybe don't know much about Iceberg to get a really good understanding, and kind of also get feedback from them as well so we can make Iceberg better. So, cool. I guess if that's it, you can call it. Thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone.
Bye, everyone.